Well, Iran's president says his country will continue negotiations with the United States over its nuclear program. However, he said Tehran will not retreat despite threats from the U.S. During his trip to the Middle East last week, President Trump told reporters that Iran has to move forward in the negotiations with the U.S. or, quote, something bad's going to happen. The U.S. and Iran wrapped up their fourth round of talks in Oman on May 11th. We want to bring in Dan Raviv now. He's the host of the Mossad Files podcast. Dan, thanks so much for joining us. So how close do you think we are to actually getting a deal between Washington and Tehran?
Well, good morning, Michael. Of course, it's hard to tell. There is another round of talks scheduled this coming weekend in Rome. And this past weekend, Iran's foreign minister in charge of the talks on their side met with the foreign ministers of two Arab countries, Qatar and Oman, that often has acted as mediators. Now, the word from the Trump administration is it's very simple. Iran cannot have the ability to enrich uranium because highly enriched uranium could be used in a nuclear bomb. Iran, on the other hand, is saying as recently as this morning that if the U.S. stands on that, no ability to enrich, then the talks are going nowhere. So I wouldn't be too optimistic, but President Trump really made it clear that there isn't that much time. And the threat that he issued is pretty clear that there'd be a U.S. military strike on Iran's nuclear facilities if a deal cannot be reached. So I think we're at a very kind of tense time, and it has to do whether Iran possibly could have the potential of developing a nuclear bomb.
And jumping off of that point, we're in the midst of an ongoing crisis in the Middle East. Does that at all impact Tehran's position here?
Yeah, in various ways. I would say that Iran has been weakened in the Middle East because its friend in Gaza, the extremist former rulers of Gaza, Hamas, they've been knocked really hard by Israel's very harsh war in Gaza. In Lebanon, Hezbollah was practically an Iranian puppet. Hezbollah's been knocked very hard by Israel. President Assad of Syria, he's gone. He was an Iranian ally. I could go on. So politically, Iran, has been knocked quite hard. And so it seems they want to retain their nuclear potential, if anything, to still have influence as a regional power. Of course, the United States and America's ally Israel would like to knock that down. So we're on the edge of something big, but for a while at least, it seems talks will continue. It's just that the U.S. says that Iran can't have any nuclear enrichment capability at all.
And Dan, it was just last week that President Trump was in the Middle East. How do you think the U.S.'s allies in the region will be viewing these talks between the U.S. and Iran?
Well, they want a deal, and I'm thinking Saudi Arabia is the most important country that President Trump visited. They want a deal. They don't want war, of course, but they do not want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. By the way, Saudi Arabia was pressing President Trump for the okay, with U.S. help, to have some nuclear enrichment for peaceful purposes in Saudi Arabia. But for now, the U.S. has held off on that. So I think President Trump wants to minimize the possibility that there will be a nuclear arms race in the Middle East.
All right, Dan Raviv, thanks for offering your insight. We appreciate